Picture this. A 3-year-old child stands in a crowded Tokyo supermarket, just denied their favorite toy. Instead of screaming or throwing a massive tantrum, the child simply nods and walks away. No yelling. No threats from the mother. Just pure calm. How is this possible? Are Japanese children born with fewer emotions? Or is there a secret, harsh punishment waiting at home? The truth is, most Western parents are trapped in an exhausting loop of punishing, soothing, and punishing again. But here is what most parents don't realize. What looks like gentle discipline in Japan is actually doing something much deeper. It doesn't rely on fear or rewards. Instead, it targets a completely different part of the child's developing brain. If you are exhausted from playing the police officer in your own home, keep watching. Today, we decode the psychological blueprint behind the world's calmest kids. In the Western world, the default approach to parenting is heavily rooted in behavior modification. When a child misbehaves, the immediate instinct is to correct the action using external control, timeouts, taking away privileges, or raising our voices. The logic seems straightforward. Punish the bad behavior, reward the good, and the child will eventually learn. However, developmental psychology reveals a glaring flaw in this system. Relying on punishments primarily creates fear-based compliance, not genuine self-regulation. The child behaves well only because an authority figure is present. The moment that threat is removed, the undesirable behavior often returns. Furthermore, neuroscientific research shows that punitive measures cause a significant spike in a child's cortisol levels. This stress hormone forces their developing brain into a fight, flight, or freeze state, effectively shutting down the prefrontal cortex, the exact part of the brain responsible for logic and learning. You cannot teach a child a lesson while their brain is fighting for survival. But here is where the misunderstanding begins. If we strip away the timeouts and strict punishments, won't children just run wild? How do Japanese parents maintain such remarkable order without these standard tools of control? The answer is that they do not wait for the child to cross the line to start teaching. While most of the world focuses on reacting to bad behavior, Japanese parenting is built on anticipation. They are actively wiring the child's brain for emotional control long before a tantrum ever brews. And this is the part most adults never stop to think about. And to understand how they achieve this quiet obedience, we have to look at 3 foundational pillars, starting with a concept that fundamentally rewrites the definition of discipline. In the Western world, the default approach to parenting is heavily rooted in behavior modification. When a child misbehaves, the immediate instinct is to correct the action using external control, timeouts, taking away privileges, or raising our voices. The logic seems straightforward. Punish the bad behavior, reward the good, and the child will eventually learn. However, developmental psychology reveals a glaring flaw in this system. Relying on punishments primarily creates fear-based compliance, not genuine self-regulation. The child behaves well only because an authority figure is present. The moment that threat is removed, the undesirable behavior often returns. Furthermore, neuroscientific research shows that punitive measures cause a significant spike in a child's cortisol levels. This stress hormone forces their developing brain into a fight, flight, or freeze state, effectively shutting down the prefrontal cortex, the exact part of the brain responsible for logic and learning. You cannot teach a child a lesson while their brain is fighting for survival. But here is where the misunderstanding begins. If we strip away the timeouts and strict punishments, won't children just run wild? How do Japanese parents maintain such remarkable order without these standard tools of control? The answer is that they do not wait for the child to cross the line to start teaching. While most of the world focuses on reacting to bad behavior, Japanese parenting is built on anticipation. They are actively wiring the child's brain for emotional control long before a tantrum ever brews. And this is the part most adults never stop to think about. To understand how they achieve this quiet obedience, we have to look at three foundational pillars, starting with a concept that fundamentally rewrites the definition of discipline. The first pillar of the Japanese parenting blueprint is a profound concept called Shitsuke, pronounced Shitsuke. While Western dictionaries often translate this word directly as discipline, its true cultural root means something entirely different. Originally derived from the imagery of agriculture and planting, Shitsuke translates closer to nurturing, training, or cultivating good habits until they become seamlessly instinctual. In the West, discipline is largely viewed as a reactive event. A child misbehaves, crosses a boundary, and the parent immediately intervenes to administer a consequence. Shitsuke, however, operates on a completely different psychological timeline: anticipation before escalation. Japanese parents focus heavily on ritualizing daily routines, from neatly taking off shoes at the door to greeting elders, long before any emotional conflict arises. By modeling these behaviors repeatedly without anger, they wire the child's developing brain for predictability. Developmental psychology heavily supports this methodical approach. Neurologically, a young child's brain thrives on predictable, rhythmic patterns. When expectations are deeply embedded into daily rituals rather than shouted during a crisis, learning bypasses the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system. Instead, it takes root in the basal ganglia, the neural region responsible for automatic habit formation. Rather than forcing compliance through fear of punishment, Shitsuke makes calm, respectful behavior the child's default physiological state. This creates a stark contrast in everyday parenting. A Western parent might deliver a stern lecture after a child throws a massive tantrum in a public restaurant. A Japanese parent practicing Shitsuke would have spent weeks quietly demonstrating how to sit patiently at the dining table at home, gently physically guiding the child's body without a single raised voice. They do not demand immediate obedience in a stressful environment. They cultivate readiness in a safe one. Think about your own daily parenting battles. Are you spending 90% of your energy correcting your child's mistakes rather than patiently guiding their behavior before the chaos even happens? By treating discipline as a shared ritual rather than a battle of wills, Shitsuke prevents most behavioral fires before they ever spark. It creates a rhythm of life that children find deeply comforting. But no matter how well a child is prepared, there will always be inevitable moments of frustration, failure, and emotional overload. What happens then? Do Japanese parents rush in to aggressively soothe their crying toddlers? This is where people usually get it wrong. When things get difficult, the second philosophy takes over, and it fundamentally contradicts the modern instinct to constantly protect our children from discomfort. And the second pillar of Japanese parenting philosophy is a concept called Mimamoru, pronounced Mi-ma-mo-ru. Linguistically, this word is composed of two parts: mi, meaning to observe, and mamoru, meaning to protect. Combined, it doesn't mean protection by shielding from all risks, but rather observing and protecting from a distance. This method proactively creates space for the child to figure things out on their own, to explore their limits without immediate adult intervention. In Western culture, the concept of helicopter parenting is very common. When a child struggles or whines in frustration with a toy, the adult instinct is to rush in to the rescue. They do it for the child and soothe them to quell the frustration. In contrast, Japanese parents who apply Mimamoru intentionally step back. They closely monitor to ensure safety, but are resolute in not depriving children of the opportunity to experience failure. Developmental psychology calls this the productive struggle. When children face obstacles and feel frustrated, their brains begin to form new neural connections to solve problems and manage emotions. If adults constantly intervene, children will lose their ability to self-regulate. Instead of overcoming frustration, they will only learn to cry louder to call for help. Mimamoru is not abandonment, but quiet guidance that helps children develop emotional resilience. Ask yourself, how many times have you done things for your child yourself because you couldn't stand the sound of their frustration while they were struggling? Instead of salvaging the situation, Japanese parents choose to trust in their children's abilities, and they understand that a little frustration today is the foundation for resilience tomorrow. But this is where people often get it wrong. Watching a child fend for themselves sounds cold and distant by Western standards. But that's not true. Mimamoru only works effectively when it's rooted in an extremely deep connection. The heart of Japanese discipline lies in a third concept, a peculiar psychological state for which the West doesn't even have a vocabulary to accurately translate. The third pillar, and perhaps the most misunderstood concept in Japanese parenting philosophy, is Amae, pronounced ma. While there's no exact Western equivalent, Amae essentially describes the need for support, the desire to be pampered, and the yearning for complete protection from a caregiver. It's the deepest foundation of what developmental psychologists call secure attachment. In Western culture, independence is often encouraged from a very young age. Parents are advised to train their children to self-soothe, and separate from their parents' embrace to avoid spoiling them. However, the Japanese have a completely opposite scientific perspective. They believe a child can only truly become independent and confident after being allowed absolute dependence in their early years. When a child knows for sure that their emotional needs are always met, understood even before they have to ask, they won't need to scream or throw tantrums to get attention. And this is where people often misunderstand. We often see a child clinging to their mother or crying for attention in public as a naughty child or one who is manipulating adults. But from Amae's perspective and modern neuroscience, that behavior isn't defiant. It's simply a missing skill or a warning sign that the child's nervous system is running out of a sense of secure connection. Instead of pushing the child away with time-out punishments and saying, "You're too old, stop crying," Japanese parents calmly embrace Amae. They allow the child to revert to being a baby when needed, replenishing their emotional reservoir with unwavering presence. Consider this. If a child cannot rely on you when they are at their weakest and most panicked, how can they learn the courage to confidently face the storms of the world? The remarkable obedience of Japanese children doesn't stem from a fear of corporal punishment, but rather from this very sense of absolute security. Raising Amae demonstrates that true discipline is never a breakdown of connection. On the contrary, it uses that very connection to guide. But merely dissecting these academic concepts isn't enough to create true peace in your home. All of this leads to a truth that completely changes how we define parenting. The quiet obedience of Japanese children does not stem from fear, harsh punishments, or perfectly executed timeouts. It is the result of a completely different psychological blueprint. Through Shitsuke, parents anticipate challenges and wire the child's brain for predictability long before a crisis ever occurs. Through Mimamoru, they intentionally step back, allowing the child the necessary space for productive struggle and emotional resilience. And at the very core of it all is Amae, the unconditional, secure attachment that ensures a child never has to scream just to feel seen or understood. But perhaps the most challenging part of this entire philosophy isn't changing your child. It is changing yourself. It requires us to unlearn the Western instinct to control and accept a profound cultural wisdom. Discipline is not something you do to a child. It is something you do with them. Tomorrow, I challenge you to try Mimamoru. The next time your toddler gets frustrated, just wait 5 seconds before rushing in to rescue them. Give them the gift of figuring it out. If this perspective shifted how you view your parenting journey, hit the subscribe button. And tell me in the comments, what is the hardest part about holding back when your child is struggling? As you experiment with these Japanese parenting concepts, remember that every child is wonderfully unique. What works immediately for one toddler might take a little more time and patience for another. Please note that the psychological insights and cultural observations shared in this video are for educational and inspirational purposes only. They are not intended to replace professional medical, psychological, or educational advice. Always consult with a qualified pediatrician or child development specialist if you have deep concerns about your child's behavior or well-being. Don't forget to like this video and share your journey with us in the comments.